I'm
So
good.
hello everyone, welcome to the latest Sunshine Bites from the ICBE Advanced Productivity SkillNet. Today our presenter is Eilish Henry from CISU Consulting Group. Eilish is the Director for Europe of CISU Consulting Group. She is experienced in business delivery and organizational change, in particular cultural change, including both design and implementation. She is a Shingo examiner and was the first Shingo global coach and facilitator appointed in Europe. She has delivered more than 80 Shingo workshops and supported 30 organizations to the level of Shingo recognition, from the Shingo Bronze Medallion to the Ultimate Shingo Prize. In 2014, she was awarded the Order of British Empire, OBE, for her work in leading large cultural change programs in the UK public sector. Today's topic is COVID-19 and your daily management system, why it's worth persevering with SEM in challenging times. Over the course of 20 minutes, Eilish will share thoughts and experiences on the benefits to individuals, employees, teams and organizations from maintaining the disciplines of the DMS routines whilst making sensible adjustments to reflect necessary changes to our new way of working. The ground rules: Eilish will present for approximately 20 minutes, finishing up with a 10-minute Q&A. Everybody is muted, but we really do encourage you to submit questions via the chat function, which we will call out at the end of the presentation. Alternatively, if you wish, you can ask a question, unmute yourself, call Eilish's name, state your own, followed by a question or comment. This will stop us talking over each other. This session is being recorded. And without further delay, I'll pass you over to the trusted hands of Eilish.
Oh, and thank you very much indeed. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you to the ICBE for the opportunity to join the webinar today. And I thought I would start with some numbers and tell the wider audience a little bit about myself beyond what you've covered in the introduction in terms of some numbers. And first up is number 12. And of course, now I have to remember what number 12 is about. So 12 represents the number of years I've been working with the Shingo Institute and the Shingo model for operational excellence, which is a principle-based model which has been adopted by organizations around the world and has been very strong in Ireland. You may have seen the symbols for the Shingo model, so you may well recognize this. The next number is 11, and 11 represents the number of years that I have been collaborating with the ICBE, and that's been a very powerful collaboration. And in my mind, and I'm not being paid by the ICBE to say this, but the ICBE is one of the most powerful member organizations in the world. And I've worked in countries around the world, from Asia, Southeast Asia, North America, and the ICBE is definitely the strongest membership organization I've come across. And it's undoubtedly one of the reasons why Ireland has been so successful in terms of adopting operational excellence and the Shingo model in particular. 31, number 31, represents the number of client organizations that I've worked with as they've been striving on their journey towards operational excellence and have achieved different levels of Shingo recognition. And these organizations are dispersed globally, not just here in Ireland. Different levels of recognition: Shingo Prize, Silver Medallion, Bronze Medallion. This is one of my favorite numbers, again, number 12. And in this case, it's the number of Shingo Prize recipient. That's the top level of recognition. Shingo Prize recipient organizations I've worked with around the world. And that's been a privilege, a very great privilege, to work with great organizations, but great people, great individuals. Oops, going the wrong way. Back to my favorite number. Okay, 12 organizations, and there's the Shingo Prize. This, though, is possibly the most favorite number of all, 12 out of 13. And 12 out of 13 represents the number of organizations in Ireland that I have supported on their Shingo journeys to achieve different levels of recognition. And the tally is there on the left-hand side. So there are 6 Shingo Prize recipient organizations in Ireland, 3 silver medallions, 4 bronze medallions. And somebody in the Shingo Institute pointed it out to me a few years ago, and now I'm quite happy to quote it widely, that per head of population, Ireland has more Shingo Award recipients than any other country, including the United States, which is where the Shingo model originated. So that's impressive. And it didn't happen by accident. I mentioned earlier the contribution the ICBE made, but the organizations themselves, hundreds of organizations across Ireland and beyond that, have been working very hard not just to challenge for shingle recognition, but to develop robust systems, and in particular, standard daily management systems that allow them to manage their work effectively for the benefit of their people, but also for the benefit of customers. And those organizations are from multiple different sectors. These are just a selection of some of the organizations in CISU that we work with. So there are manufacturers in there, but there are also higher education, healthcare organizations as well. So that's a number that I think is going to be very familiar with you, or to you. And it's something that's been impinging on all of our lives, including all of these great organizations in Ireland who've been struggling to maintain their adherence to robust daily systems and the standard daily management in the face of the enemy, COVID-19. And it's interesting because, like probably a lot of you on the call today, on the webinar today, I had actually seen this as being a one-off, being the very worst experience that most of us have had, unique situation. And then at the weekend, I was reading through some of the UK newspapers and came across this image, and you may have come across this yourselves already. And you see they're all wearing face masks, and one of them's got a placard saying, "Wear a mask or go to jail." And this is courtesy of the Observer newspaper, but actually the photograph dates back to 1918, and it represents the outbreak of Spanish flu after the First World War. And this was in fact just before the second wave of the flu in 1918, 1919. And mask wearing was recommended as a way of trying to prevent the second and then third wave, both of which actually happened, not just in California, but globally. So I guess that's a reminder to all of us, by the way, as we're heading back to work, to think very carefully about how we protect ourselves and protect our colleagues, our friends, and our families from COVID-19. So this has had a very big impact on organizations and on individuals, and some of this is very familiar to you. So all of us are experiencing the impact on our personal lives, the lockdown providing constraints on travel and mobility, social distancing rules. If we're out shopping, for example, we're still able to go shopping, shielding. Some of you may well have vulnerable members of your family or friendship group or in your neighbours, where in fact they're not only in lockdown, but actually they have to be shielded because their, for example, immune systems are particularly vulnerable. Homeschooling. Now, I'm past the stage of homeschooling, and I say that with a very broad smile. My grandchildren are being homeschooled by their parents, and that's been a bit of a mixed blessing. I think the children to some extent have been enjoying it, but are now looking forward to going back to school. And the mummies and daddies by and large are looking forward to them going back to school as well, and have a newfound respect for what our teachers do every day. There have been lots of losses, personal losses, and I think very few of us have managed to get through this period without some loss, either family, friends, or neighbours. Financial losses, we see evidence of that all around us, and hopefully you're in the position where you're still being protected financially by employers or by government. And of course, loss of freedom, which I personally happen to feel is a reasonable loss at the moment in the circumstances. It's a sacrifice I feel willing to make. Significant changes also, though, to working practices. So you've seen things like furloughing, extended leave, remote working becoming the norm for many people, changes to shift patterns for those who are actually able to be back in work, back in their plant, for example, social distancing in work as well as outside of work, and enhanced levels of hygiene and the standards of 5S or 6S, and new and increased levels of PPE. Now, many of you would already have been familiar with those, because I suspect a number of you work in sectors where there already are very high standards of hygiene and PPE requirements. For example, if you're in food or pharmaceuticals, or you're in medical devices, which are very strong in Ireland. Something which may be a possibility for us in the future, in addition to all of these, temperature screening, increased levels of health screening to make sure that we're not coming to work when we're unwell and risking, for example, spreading COVID-19 to our workmates. So what we've seen then is really huge impacts, but also I think a huge contribution being made, not just by healthcare and social care workers, but by other key workers. And I suspect a number of you on the call today, on the webinar today, are amongst those key workers, that the organizations that you work for are producing products that are incredibly important, not just to the economy, but to our safety, our well-being. People, for example, in food or pharma or medical devices. And we owe all of you a lot. And hopefully that recognition of your contribution continues once this immediate crisis is over. So just a quick reminder of some of the people contributing to that, the obvious ones in hospitals, medical practices, in care homes, residential homes, but also the people, for heaven's sake, who take away our rubbish, take away our bins or our debris on a regular basis. They're all making huge contributions to our safety and well-being. So are there silver linings to all of this? To my mind, there are. And okay, I'm a bit of an optimist. People who know me well will say that. But there are many indications of silver linings. I observe much more evidence of kindness in the wider community. And perhaps it was always there and we just didn't pay enough attention to it. But lots of evidence of that. The appreciation of the contribution of our key workers, and hopefully that in the future they'll get more tangible forms of recognition. And I don't mean pretty badges. Pretty badge is lovely, and the clapping we do every Thursday in Northern Ireland, where I'm located, for our healthcare workers, but maybe something more tangible for them by way of decent salaries to recognise the contribution that they do make. But an appreciation also of the little things. And I'm blessed, I'm fortunate, because I live in a remote rural area. But because I tend to work away from home quite a lot, and that's meant a lot of travel, very often I've not paid enough attention to my own environment and to the wonders of nature. And I'm not now much more aware of birdsong, and that's been wonderful. And if you have the chance to explore the beauties of nature around you in walks or in the parks, it's certainly worth doing. But a very impressive silver lining for me, and particularly for what we're talking about today, the rapid adjustment to change. Now, for many of us, and for me, who's worked with change for many, many years and helping organizations come to terms with change, we've often had this perception that change is difficult and change takes a long time to achieve. And if we say to organizational leaders, how long will it take you to achieve this cultural change? They'll say something like, oh, 5 years, 10 years typically. But I think what this current crisis of COVID-19 has demonstrated to us, that if we have the proverbial burning platform, if we have a compelling reason to change, we can change pretty quickly. And a lot of us have done that. So we see the use of vastly increased use of online platforms like Microsoft Teams and Zoom to allow us to connect electronically with our colleagues, with our managers, for example, and our leaders, and that's been absolutely brilliant. Where that has been really successful, it really has helped people to enjoy remote working and to continue to contribute to their organizations while they're remote working. So some of the pollsters like Gallup have come back with lots of evidence that where remote working is being supported by effective leadership, then we're getting very high levels of productivity from individuals. Their contribution remains very, very high. The opposite is true, of course. If they're not being supported effectively by leaders, then their contribution tends to be lower, and indeed they're feeling less satisfied with the experience of home working. So to my mind, there's going to be a long-term benefit from this. I don't think we're going to go back completely to the old ways of working, and there's lots of, I think, good going to come from that. I read in the newspapers yesterday, in fact, that in the UK, 300,000 people have given up smoking through being based at home during this crisis. So that has to be positive. I haven't seen a figure for Ireland yet, but I'm hoping it's going to be something similar. Huge benefit there. So standard daily management, which was supposed to be the subject of today, putting it very, very simply, and there are lots of definitions for this, so please don't feel that I'm giving you the only definition, but it's really, it describes how we most effectively and efficiently manage our daily work to best meet customer demand. And essentially, it means that we are balancing people and process and our focus on those. Although in my experience, I think many organizations have maybe had more focus on process and slightly less on people. And maybe what we're seeing now in this current crisis is going to help us rethink that. And my recommendation is that you certainly should do during the duration of the crisis and afterwards. So typically there'll be a number of systems in this: visual management, daily huddles, tiered meetings, leaders' standard work, which will include Gemba walks and coaching of their people, continuous improvement, which is sometimes referred to as daily Kaizen, and team-based problem solving. And all of these constitute standard daily management. Now, there are more systems. It's not a comprehensive list. So again, please don't feel that I'm giving you a definitive list that you have to live by. There are many more systems also. But what importantly it should be is it should be connected to achieving our organization's overall vision, mission, and strategy. And that's a very important point to be making at the moment. We have to maintain that connection to where it is we're going in the longer term, so that we don't get sucked into depression by the daily tasks that we have to complete during COVID. It should also be focused on some fundamental principles. Based on those principles, like respect for people, like leading with humility, creating value for the customer. And ultimately, in my experience, having principles that inform our daily management system will actually help us answer the question why. It helps us understand the purpose of the system, and therefore why we should be striving to adhere to the core of it, the core elements of it, during a crisis like the current one. I thought this little quote from Covey was worth reminding us of. The three constants in life: change, choice, and principles. The three constants. In other words, change is always with us. Admittedly, it's been on a very different scale recently, but we're always going to be facing change. We've always got choices to make, and principles, to my mind, and in my experience, should be very much part of our lives, and they should be a constant in it. So why do I think we should be persevering then with standard daily management? And it comes back in my mind to the responsibility of leaders. Leaders to be visible and supportive. Now that's challenging currently, but it's possible. And the electronic platforms I talked about a few minutes ago, like Zoom and Teams, give leaders the opportunity to connect on a regular basis with their people. And for those of their team members who are actually back in the plant and back working, there's a very strong obligation on leaders, a responsibility of leaders, to continue to be visible and supportive to them whilst maintaining social distance and observing all the PPE requirements. Very important to offer reassurance. There's evidence that some people can feel a real sense of depression during this period, particularly when they're working remotely and they're suffering all the other consequences of lockdown and reduced mobility. So leaders have a responsibility to reassure their people and to maintain trust with their people. And that's why that connection on a regular basis, daily basis, I would suggest, becomes really important. So maintaining a daily team huddle has got real benefits in terms of leaders supporting their people. Being realistic, but also optimistic. So not trying to say, look, things are great, things are going to be hunky-dory. We don't know that. We can be optimistic though. There are signs of good things happening, and good things will happen again. But it's very important then that leaders also remind people of what the long-term vision for the organization is. While we're dealing with the consequences of this crisis in the short term, what's the bigger picture and what's our connection to that? And that's something that we can only do if we stay in regular contact with our people. And I just thought I'd share with you this quote from Alvin Toffler. Being able to think about the big things while you're actually discharging the smaller things, doing the things you have to do every day in a crisis, but remembering what the bigger picture is. And I think we need to adjust our standard daily management to reflect that. There's no point in imagining that we don't have to make adjustments. Adjustments that, for example, take into account social distancing, take into account remote working. So we need to give some thought to how we actually can use the systems we've developed as part of standard daily management then to reflect this new normal. Shifting the focus of standard daily management from primarily that of process to that of people, focusing on our people and remembering they are human beings. they have got concerns over and above their work and their commitments to work. They've got families. If they've got children, they're probably struggling with the challenges, opportunities of homeschooling. And so they've got other things that they need to bear in mind as well, other concerns. So one of the things we really should be doing as managers and as leaders is making sure that we respect that connection with them. We ask them, how are you doing? How are things going? And is there anything I can do to support you through this period? That's our job as leaders, to help our people succeed. And of course then to reinforce the power of teams as effective work units, as effective problem-solving units. Leaders' responsibility for that. Team members contribute, but leaders really have a big responsibility here. And I thought I'd finish on this, and it's a quote from one of my favorite authors, Edgar Schein. Being physically near one another doesn't of itself make a group a team, and indeed nor does reporting to the same boss. What makes a team is task or emotional interdependence. And we need to continue to foster that, focus on that during this period of COVID. So that's my tuppence worth, and I'd like to hand over to you to see if you want to ask any questions.
Eilish, thank you very much, and bang on 20 minutes.
Oh, good,
That's
good.
excellent. We do have some questions, so I'll kick off the first one. Can I ask what good leadership for remote working looks like? I've seen examples everywhere from remote micro management to absentee managers. Where is the sweet spot?
And I strongly suspect that it's somewhere in between those two extremes. I really feel from many years working with organizations that the worst thing you can do as a leader is to micromanage your people in these circumstances. A lot of the failures of remote working in the past were due to lack of trust between managers and team members. We literally didn't trust our people to get on and do the job that they had to do. And therefore we were constantly second guessing them or preventing them remote working. And I think some of that can carry through into the current situation. So we have to guard against that. We wouldn't do that if our people were present in the workplace, I hope, okay? We wouldn't be trying to micromanage them. We shouldn't be doing that when they are working remotely. But we should stay in touch with them on a regular basis. So typically what we might want to do is to have a weekly team meeting with all of the team on a Zoom call like this one. And then maybe every day connect to a different member of the team to see how things are going and what help that they need as an individual rather than just the collective team. And then perhaps at the end of the week, have a reflection session, which is, well, what went well for you this week, individually and collectively, and what do we need to do differently? But micromanagement is, I think, one of our worst sins. Probably the next worst sin, or maybe equally bad, is just not being there for them, simply not connecting to them at all. And I think that's an abdication of leadership. We need to be connecting to our people. We've no excuse now. The technical capacity is there. We've got lots of choices, lots of platforms that we can use. And we can still lift the telephone, but personally, I think this ability to see the people we're talking to becomes really, really important. Hope that answers the question.
It does indeed, and it's very changing. I think since people learn new management skills that they didn't have before. Any tips on performing good virtual Gembas? Did I pronounce it right?
It's a really good question because it's something we're wrestling with. We're teaching remote Shingo workshops where we go to Gemba, and what we're doing is we're using an iPad, okay, to help us with that. So if you are genuinely working remotely as a manager, as a leader, and you're wanting to have your presence in the Gemba, what you might need to do is to ask one of the team to take, if they've got a phone, for example, an Android or an iPhone, or better still, if they've got an iPad, because your image is going to be slightly bigger, and to take that to the Gemba on your behalf, and then to talk to the people and members of your team in the area where they're working, have that two-way conversation with them. And that's been working pretty well. I'm not saying it's as good as being physically present, but it's pretty good. It's been surprisingly effective as a way of doing that.
Right, so use tools that we have that are easily available.
Absolutely.
Here's a long one. So remote working for a full company, in my case, means we no longer have physical management boards. And we have also lost the ad hoc chats that in some cases allow a team to judge where they are with their tasks progress during the day. Do you have any hints on how to replace these virtually?
I guess what you can do, and it's a bit of a pity that we've lost the physical boards. I'm a big fan, okay? Not a troglodyte, but a big fan of physical boards. But we do have electronic boards, and we have the ability with Zoom and indeed with Teams to actually create those physical boards. So we can share some of our performance information with our colleagues on those boards, okay? Just capture them. It's not ideal, but it's a pretty effective way of sharing that. And it's possible also to recreate some of the Americans call them water cooler conversations, you know, the little chats we might have when we go to make a coffee or a cup of tea. We can recreate those chats by connecting with our people, again, using Zoom or Teams. So we can literally catch up with our colleagues. Well, literally, how is it going for you? And you can do that by pre-booking those occasions. So they're perhaps a little bit more regulated, a bit more formal, not informal. But if you know your colleagues particularly well and you feel that they're open to taking a call from you, you should, you know, be feeling free to do that. Out of respect, though, for their other commitments, it might be better to accept that you need to have regular sessions for that, little catch-up sessions. They can be brief, just as team huddles should be brief. They could be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but you can accomplish quite a lot in that time.
This is an excellent, it's quite an interesting question, especially at the stage of the crisis that people are kind of at the moment. Do you see us keeping many of the virtual tools after, or resorting to the old boards, for example, agendas, attendance far higher remotely?
I'm a big fan, and arguably I'm a newfound fan of this remote working. My colleague Mike, he's based in Oregon in the United States, and we Zoom every day. And both of us have been saying, why do we wander around the world delivering workshops when we can do it like this? It's so much easier. Part of the reason is because the interaction, the face-to-face connection is quite good. But I would like to think that many companies will continue to use this technology. It's fabulous technology, and it gives us more freedom of choice and gives more flexibility to our people as well, to our team members. So I don't know the answer definitely, but I'd like to think that companies would see the wisdom of it. I certainly will be recommending it.
Great. There's just one more question. If there's any more, please, we have time for one more question after this. Can I just ask, does this put a bit more pressure on people to have systems for recording and documenting kind of changes, and how should they communicate them to the broader team?
I think it does, but again, the electronic media allow you to do that. You have the facility, for example, to record sessions like this you're recording at the moment, but you've also got the whiteboard facility that you can use, so you can capture things, you can document things on that, and then you can share them either in that way in a call, a team call, Microsoft Team call, or a Zoom call, or you can email them to each other. And you've got Slack, for example, which means that all the members of a team can connect through Slack. It seems to me that's a great way, either for formal or for informal communications as well. It's very fast. I've been using that a lot with clients, but also with my colleague Mike in the US. So I think that's probably worth considering for the future.
Right, and it sounds like the time to start is now, rather than waiting till people return to the physical environment. You know, if they can capture some of their visual management boards now and share with the team and have those conversations now in advance of whatever the new norm looks like.
Great one. Absolutely agree, Johan.
Right. Eilish, thank you very much for those insights. If there's no further questions, I don't want to hold people back from lunch anymore. The slides from today will be uploaded to the ICBE website later on, along with a video recording. Eilish, thank you for Eilish Henry from CISU. Thank you for the valuable insights, and to everyone who attended today, thank you very much for your time. And we look forward to seeing you at the next lunchtime bites.
Great, and thank you everyone, and stay safe and stay well. Bye.
Thank you very much, Eilish.